Welcome to Connect It with Kim. I'm Kim McDonald, connecting you to the stories of the change agents of our world. You change, they change.
Well, hello, and welcome to my very exciting interview with Jason Goldberg. Jason is, among many things, author of the book Prison Break, motivational speaker, entertainer, entrepreneur, and what I call a mindset shifter. Jason brings play to everything he pursues, and so I'm so excited to get to have fun with him today and lighten up. So welcome, Jason.
Woo! Let's play. What up, Kim? So happy to be here with you, and thanks for that awesome introduction. And I'm super excited that we literally get to play today. Like, how awesome is that? This is our lives.
Yeah, I think, we're both coaches and we both deal probably with heavy stuff a lot of the times. But what drew me to you as a human was your ability to just see the good in everything and make light of it. And I know that probably you didn't always see things that way. Do you want to take us back to a time where you had to learn that because you weren't so happy?
Yeah, I mean, it was like an hour ago, right? It's like, it's never, I love that. And I love that people see me that way. And I love that I hopefully like activate that in them and give them permission to be more light about things that people tend to think are very serious. But the reason I'm uniquely qualified to help people with that is because it's my work every single day in the world. And I don't mean just with clients. I mean, like on myself, it's my work in the world. And so I was somebody that it was always interesting. Like for me, I've always been like from a very, very young age, I was always like the class clown, the ham, like, my mom always tells a story that teachers would send home my progress report on my report card and would say like, Jason's such a bright kid. He adds so much value. Like he's very smart. If we could just get him to shut up for 5 minutes, he'd be the perfect student. Right. And so like from a very early age, I was always somebody who's very talkative, very outgoing and liked to play around a lot. And at the same time, for whatever reason, I mean, it's conditioning, it's environment, it's whatever it is that you learn when you're younger, that this is the way you react to things when they don't go your way, which I'm guessing I got from family or from whoever. And this is not to blame them, but we pick up what we pick up. My default has always been historically to get stressed out about things that didn't feel like they were fun, or to get overwhelmed, or, to have this stress response of if something's not going exactly according to plan or exactly according to my preferences, then I react with some kind of heavy feeling, either sadness, anxiety, depression, frustration, anger. And my defaults growing up, I think, were anger and depression. So I was the kid that would like punch holes in walls when he got upset. I never had, for whatever reason, thank God, I never had an inclination to be violent towards people, but inanimate objects, they were all fair game. So, punching a hole in the wall, or like, I remember as an adult having a difficult conversation with my boss. And when we hung up, I literally threw my cell phone against the wall and shattered it into like 600 pieces. And that was just my default way of being because I didn't know a more effective way. I won't even say a better way, a more effective way. And through the beautiful power of coaching and, being coached and introspection and willingness to experiment and willingness to see the world through a different lens than maybe the one I was programmed and conditioned to see the world through, I started seeing that there was a more effective way to be. And I keep saying effective because I don't want it to be right or wrong. A more effective way to be. I saw that there were people who had been through far worse things than I had been through, who dealt with things on a daily basis far more seemingly debilitating or devastating than the things I was going through. And yet they tended to still be fairly happy or fairly peaceful or didn't just lose their crap at everything. And so in kind of reverse engineering that and being coached, I realized it really was a choice that I could choose to bring this spirit of play, to bring the spirit of levity, to be creative and curious enough about what I was experiencing in the moment to make a different choice that empowered me and was helpful for how I wanted to feel instead of creating distance from the way I wanted to feel, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So going back to, that time when, you grew up like that, it was so ingrained in you to react, it's hard for people who are in, I say, their shit to recognize it and decide, do they want to keep playing in it or they want to go ahead and clean off and change something. So what was it? You said coaching, were you open to coaching or did that come later? What was the first aha moment that led you to something's got to give maybe, I need to be the one to change?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, because you're absolutely right. Like, how do you even have the willingness to be coached if you don't know that what you're doing, that there's another option, right? Like, how would you even know to be coached? That's a brilliant question. And willingness is key, right? Because like Dale Carnegie says, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Right. So people were telling me like, dude, don't be so serious. Dude, don't be so angry. Like, why are you getting so upset? And it's like, there's no way you're going to convince me, because this is my lens on the world. This is the way I believe the world works. And so for me, I think for most people, there is some kind of, in entrepreneur terms, when there's a liquidation event, that is when a business is sold or a business takes on new funding, and the people that were maybe earlier funders or earlier investors, there's some kind of massive change in the company and they can then take money out. There's some major catalyst that changes the structure of the company from one thing to another, and people typically benefit as a result of that. Of course, or sometimes they don't, but normally people benefit as a result of that if they invested in that company. And for me, I feel like I had so many chances to have a liquidation event my entire life. It's not like I didn't know that I was angry. It's not like I didn't know that I was 330 pounds. It's not like I didn't know when I would like cry on the floor in my closet in the morning because none of my clothes fit, that like something was off. It's not like I didn't know that stuff and I was oblivious. It's just that I think A, I didn't have an understanding that something could be different, and B, I didn't have any willingness to explore it. So for me, I think the moment where that changed, or I guess maybe the moment that like life had been loosening that pickle jar, and the one moment that really like opened the pickle jar up for the better, well, I guess didn't seem for the better at the moment, but now I know for the better, is this day where I write about it in Prison Break in chapter 1 of the book. It's chapter 1 is called "The Day the Universe Cut Me Off." And it was this day where I was in my corporate job. I was in my late 20s. I was making well over 6 figures. I was a director of engineering and operations for a tech firm in Florida. I was also 332 pounds, extremely stressed, extremely like depressed more often than not, trying to hold it together and doing good work, but really just struggling in the background. And having the bank cut off my credit card when I tried to make some fairly small purchase online and it got declined. And to kind of just shorten the story, and you can read the whole thing in the book, is I called the bank to find out why my card was being declined. And they said that they had deactivated the card because of some potentially fraudulent activity. And when we dug in to figure out what the fraudulent activity was, it was that I had eaten at 4 fast food restaurants in one day, right? And the bank thought that was suspicious. They thought that was wrong. And so that was the day that a multi-billion-dollar bank told me, you are an out-of-control fat ass, and we are taking away your access to your own money until you start making better life decisions. And that was the day. Yeah, and I couldn't escape it, Kim. I couldn't escape it. And so that was the moment where it was like, okay, something's got to give. Like everything came together. It's like, dude, you're 330 pounds. You feel like crap every day. You know, your relationships are struggling. You're angry all the time. You're not enjoying any kind of quality of life. Something's got to change. And that's when I started having the willingness. I wasn't open, but that's when I started having the willingness, the little crack where the light shines through, right? For me to start digging in and start reading personal growth and trying to get a hold on what people were doing differently than me to be successful. And that's kind of how I started down that road.
Yeah, that's amazing. You don't know when it's going to be or what it's going to take, but something's going to shift your mindset. And, and that's why I call you the mindset shifter, because a lot of times with coaching, you are coaching someone that can't see the forest for the trees, and you see so clearly what's holding them back, but it's not about you, it's about them and what will it take. And so for you, it was that realization. So what actionable steps did you take as that, 20-something-year-old that, is overweight, but still you're making decent money for that age back in that day? Not that I'm saying you're older so much that it was that long ago, but
I'm old. Kim, I'm old now. I'm an old man. Let me turn on my hearing aid so I can hear exactly what you're saying. We already talked about our glasses before we started recording, so it's fine. I'm elderly. I'm geriatric. In a world of Instagram influencers and Fitspo models, I am friggin' ancient. I get it.
And if you're ancient, then I am granny in the wheelchair. So
well, you're getting better. You're getting better.
I'm keeping up. So, how long would you say that from that point to this point where you're at now, has it been year-wise, from that first revelation to where you are now?
Yeah, it's been 9 years since that day that I was on the phone with the bank. So
Yeah.
it was, and I'd love to say like everything changed that day, but like I said, it didn't. That was just the crack, right? So I started kind of looking into personal growth stuff. I remember the first real personal growth book that I can remember reading was Think and Grow Rich, which for a lot of people is like their first one. And I remember Kim being so effing frustrated. I wanted to throw this book against the wall every single day, because for anybody who's read this book, have you read Think and Grow Rich?
I know enough about it, but I did not read it.
Okay, perfect. No, it's fine. And you're past that now. Anyways, it's a great starter book, but here's why it's also a crappy starter book, is that through the entire book, they're saying, by now you've probably seen the secret that we're talking about, and you can see how it applies. And he keeps just saying, by now you've probably seen it. And it's like bringing up so much shame for me. Because
Right.
like, just tell me the thing. Just tell me what it is that I'm missing. And I don't know if that's strategically there or if I was just really slow on the uptake. But that book was all about the power of our thinking and how the things that we, and I'll paraphrase in my own language now, the thoughts that we take seriously, the thoughts that we attach to shape our experience of life. That it's never our circumstances that create our experience of life, but it's our response to, it's our story about circumstances. And it sounds kind of trite, and I'm not trivializing anybody that's going through actual trauma, or they are, on the street, or, they're homeless, or like that, there are, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are security things that have to happen. You have to feel secure physically before you can really worry about like self-actualization. But for the majority of people, probably 99.999% of people that would be listening to this right now, you're secure enough. Doesn't mean you're not kind of living paycheck to paycheck, but you're secure. You're not wondering where your next meal is going to come from. And like if you lock your door on your house, you're pretty sure you're going to sleep and it's safe. So once you have that going for you, it's like, well, what's next, right? What would be even better than that? And that's where this thing comes in, where you say like, okay, how can I do better? How can I experience life in a way where when something comes at me, I use it as fuel as opposed to being debilitated by it? Instead of being a prisoner of circumstance where I am this weak, frail tree that's out in the middle of an open forest, completely, desolate, nothing else around me. And every time a strong gust of wind comes by, I hope and pray that it doesn't knock me over. Instead, to recognize that I don't need to be at the whim of circumstance, or who's in the White House, or the song on the radio that reminds me of my ex, or the state of the economy. All that stuff is information. And the extent to which I am willing to be creative about my explanation and interpretation of what's going out there in the world, that's the extent to which I experience some kind of peace, happiness, joy, or fulfillment in my own life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, going back to, growing up, you weren't shown a different way to think or be, and no fault of that generation, but, we're living in a different time, and we know the power of the mind to really shift on a biological level our cellular being. So we can show up energetically whoever we want to be. And so by not knowing who you wanted to show up as, or that was an opportunity to change who you were showing up as, led you long down the road into this coaching where you can be that change for other people and show them something that they might not have been privy to before. So it's beautiful work. It's very different from the work that was in IT and, in high-tech industries. If you could, as you, the coach you are now, go back to that young kid making six figures that's absolutely miserable, maybe think of how would you have coached that person that didn't even want to see, what would you have done differently as the coach of the old you?
Yeah. So it was funny when you just said old you, but I heard old Jew. And I was like, how would you coach the old Jew? I'm like, oh, old Jews are fun. They're basically families, a bunch of old Jews. So yeah. No, the old me, I get it. So yeah, I think it's so powerful what you say. And like going back to willingness, and this has been a big part of the way I coach now, is this language of inviting people to consider an alternative, right? So invitation is very soft. Consider is very soft. By me inviting you to consider an alternate explanation, or inviting you to consider an alternate perspective on the world, I'm not actually challenging your views or your perspectives, right? And that's, I think, the thing that hurts people the most in coaching, is that there's this notion in coaching that like, you got to call people on their bullshit. And, you know, if you see it, you got to say it. And like, you call them out, and it doesn't matter if it's edgy or uncomfortable. And there's a place for all of that. I agree. Not so much in my coaching. That's not because I don't like to be coached that way. I don't typically coach that way. But for some people, that's really, really effective. And if you don't want to be met with resistance around that, it has to be something that you ease people into, right? It has to be something where you lower their defenses, so they're not trying to defend their rightness. They're not trying to tell you why you're wrong for telling them they're wrong. You are simply saying, let's assume you're right. Let's assume the way you're living is the most effective way to live. How can I possibly know that the way I live would be more effective than the way you're living in your own life? I can't possibly know that. It's very egotistical for me to think that being a self-leader would be better for you than being a prisoner. Maybe it's not. Maybe being a prisoner is great for you. There's a better payoff. So let's consider all that to be true. I would invite you to consider, is there any possibility in the world that if you looked at the world slightly differently, then your experience of the world may change? It may not. I'm totally open to being wrong. But is there any possibility? And just having language like that, where you're kind of lobbing it and floating it and not having any resistance, they can say, all right, fine, I'll humor you for a minute. And okay, fine, sure. Yeah, I guess if I didn't get pissed off when somebody cut me off in traffic, then I wouldn't be pissed off when I got home and saw my wife and kids. Maybe. Boom. Like, the crack has been open, the light can shine in, and now we can actually dive into that a little deeper. But I think that's the thing. You have to it has to be a gentle thing, so people don't just fight against it right away.
Yeah, I call it planting seeds. You don't want to uproot the whole garden in the first day. You don't want to, because all you're going to do is you're going to do all the work, and then they're not going to water their garden, and it's going to be dead, and they're going to still be stuck. So yeah, we need to plant seeds based on where they're ready to be led. And some people can go faster than others. Some people, their metabolic preference is to rush into things and digest the information and put it to use and go. And that's just how they do life. And some people, they need to take things slow and steady. So I find that most people's real evolution takes about 7 to 10 years, but that doesn't mean they haven't changed along the way. So what were the 3 biggest shifts in that 9 years that you can go back and say, that was a big trajectory changing life experience, if you're willing to share those?
Sure. Yeah. I'm willing to share anything, anything that will help. So for me, this whole notion of not taking our thoughts so seriously is at the core of what my change in my life has been. There's a beautiful video and like blog post by Sadhguru. Do you know Sadhguru? Have you ever looked at his work before? No. Okay, so he's great. So it's spelled, it's hilarious. It's spelled Sad H Guru, and he's this Indian guru who's actually very funny. So it's hilarious that the word sad is in his name. But he's very funny, very entertaining. But he has this blog post and this video that really sum it up for me. And this is the thing that I really try to practice on a regular basis. Is he has this entire notion of loosening your grip, right? Loosening your grip. It's not about like, you don't have to let go of all your beliefs. You don't have to like change into some new person that you've never been before. It's just, given the situation and given the circumstances in front of you, instead of having this super tight grip on everything, trying to control every aspect of your life constantly. If you're somebody like me who's tended to be historically a control freak and type A and needing everything to be exactly to the letter of my preference, if we can loosen our grip a little bit, then the beautiful thing about that is that we don't have to actually change the circumstance that we're being faced with in order to be happy. I don't have to mold or modify or manipulate my outside world in order for my experience of that world to be different. So tool number 1 for me is just purposefully practicing loosening my grip, right? Having a more casual relationship, as I call it, with your thinking. You can have a very serious relationship with your thinking, where a thought comes up and you get married to it and you take it everywhere and you say, it's like a little dolly and you like brush its hair and you're like, tell me again how I'm fat and I'm stupid and I'm not good enough. And you take it everywhere with you. And it's like fighting to get away. No thought wants to hang out in your head that long. You're not that special. And yet we grab onto it and we want to keep it with us. So if I loosen my grip on those things and let them just pass through and notice them, I don't have to ignore them. I don't have to explain them away. Just notice them and realize that the more casual I have a relationship with those things, the less they affect me, then that's a huge turning point for me anytime I'm able to practice that. That's first and foremost, number 1.
That's very much in line with, what my book and letting go of control of everything just a little bit. And I usually tell people, start with one thing that you instinctively know is controlling you. And
Yeah.
it's almost an obsession, even if it's just giving up coffee or that Diet Coke, or, that mindset that, what if I just sit in this car and take a breath before I walk in that door, and get intentional about that transition into home life from work life, whatever it is for that person. So yeah, I think that's great. I will definitely look up the sad guru.
Yeah, look up the sad guru. He won't make you cry, I promise. So that is the first one. The second one I would say is really practicing or having this mindset of what we call in our tribe, hashtag JFT, right? And JFT is just for today. And people ask me a lot, like, how did you lose 130 pounds? And I said, I didn't. I lost 1 pound 130 times, right? And it's just like what you're saying, taking that breath in the car before you go in. Like, what can I do now? And the prisoner, somebody who comes from a prisoner perspective, typically has an all or nothing perspective. If I can't make all the change right now, I'm not going to do anything. If I can't go all in on this thing that I want to do as my career, I'm not going to do anything. If I can't have the exact right partner and relationship that I want to have right now, then I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to sit in my house and stew until all the perfect conditions are met. And so when we instead wake up every day and say, just for today, I'm going to make healthier choices in my food, for example. Tomorrow, I may pig out and eat 7 pizzas for breakfast, right? But that's so far away from today. Just for today, can I commit to making these changes, or can I commit to being willing and open to considering these other perspectives? And that goes for your health, your wealth, your relationships, whatever it is. So having this just for today perspective has been huge for me as well. And then the third one is really recognizing, and there's a chapter in Prison Break that's called Your Intuition is Drunk. And it's my favorite chapter in the book, because I say it's my favorite chapter because it's the one that I have to go back to more than any other chapter for a reminder for myself. And it's just a reminder that when we have a low level of mental health, and I don't mean mental health in the frame of like being a schizophrenic or anything like that, anything that's like serious diagnosable kind of thing, but we know when we're low, like, I talk about this thing, the ladder of self-leadership. Like when we're low, we just have access to less of our creativity. We have access to less of our calmness, our courage, our clarity. Like it's just things that aren't accessible to us. And it would be the same as if you had somebody in your life who was the most amazing mentor, the most amazing friend, the most amazing coach, that aunt or uncle that you always could go to and talk about anything. They were always there for you. And you go to that person one day because you're really, really struggling and you need some advice, you need some support, you need some encouragement, and you walk in the door to get some help from them, and they are piss drunk on the floor, right? They can barely hold their head up because they're so drunk. We would never ask that version of that person for life advice, right? We would never do that because we know they're not in the state to give us that advice. And in fact, in that moment, what we would probably do instead is say, you know what? What's going on for me is really not that important. Let me take care of this person who obviously needs my help, who's always there for me, who always has my best interest at heart. Let me turn around and do something for them. The same thing happens with our minds. When our minds are sober and they're in this high level of consciousness, we can ask that intuition. We can ask that level of consciousness for support and for assistance, and it will give it to us. But in the times that we're in a low mental state, it's like our mind is drunk. And us asking for life advice from an intuition that's drunk makes no sense. And in fact, just like with a real person in your life who is drunk, you might say to yourself, oh, you know what? I'm feeling really low right now. I probably shouldn't be asking myself these big questions or ruminating on my thoughts over and over. I should really do something to be compassionate and take care of this part of myself that seems to be down and a little drunk right now. And when you do that, you can't force your mind to just be at a high level of consciousness instantly any more than you can force somebody who's drunk to be sober instantly. But as you nurture that, and as you really have compassion and self-love and self-care, you will naturally rise back up to a higher level of consciousness. And then you can start asking yourself the questions of what to do next. So those kind of 3 things for me are things that I go back to over and over in my own life that really do make a difference.
That's very in line with my thinking and what took me 10 years to really understand and learn for myself, And so what is a routine when you're drunk intuition has you in those ruminating thoughts? Do you have a protocol to get yourself back out of that head into your heart, ground yourself, and start getting back into a flow state? Do you have anything for us there?
Yeah, I think of a young 20-something blonde, hot superstar in a red latex outfit. And that may sound really weird, but I'll tell you what I mean. So the first step is noticing. right? You have to notice that you're being hijacked, right? If you don't notice, you can't do anything about it. Nathaniel Branden was one of my favorite teachers, not directly, he's passed away, but as far as reading his books and consuming his content, he wrote a book called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem and a lot of great stuff. And he has this amazing quote, and the quote is, you can't leave a place you've never been. Right? You can't leave a place you've never been. So the noticing is so important, to know where I'm coming from in this moment, because I can't leave that place until I do it. My version of that is you can't get out of bed until you wake up, right? Because if you do, you're sleepwalking and you're not actually conscious, right? So you can't get out of bed till you wake up. So the first step is just to notice that. And once I notice that, then comes the hottie in the red latex outfit, because I say that I'm having a Britney Spears moment. And I notice this thought pop in my head. I notice that it's hijacking me. And then I say to myself, oops, I did it again, right? A thought popped in my head and I attached to it. I took it seriously. This poor innocent thought that came out of random impulses in my mind that are taking in all of the bias and the judgment and the input of 39 years on this planet that has just kind of popped up out of nowhere. I have taken full responsibility for it. It's not my thought. It just appeared. Why am I taking it so seriously? Why am I trying to keep something here permanently that's completely temporary and transient? So for me, is if I can get into that space of slowing down enough to notice, oh, I'm doing that thing again, right? It doesn't serve me. I don't need to let go of it. I don't even need to process it. I just need to notice that it's there and to check in with myself again, how casual or how serious I'm taking that thought. So that's really my protocol. And for me, as my own transformation continues to evolve, because you're never done with this work. If anybody tells you like they're done, it would be like somebody saying, oh, I finished the internet. Like you don't finish the internet, right? It just keeps growing and keeps going. But for me, what transformation looks like now for me, when I can really celebrate myself, and I probably shouldn't say that, you should celebrate yourself for everything. But the times I really consciously feel like I can celebrate myself is when the window of time between that event happening and me feeling this sense of triggering comes up, and the time that I'm back to like peace and equanimity, window of time closes. To me, that's massive transformation. If it goes from being an hour to being 45 minutes of the time I feel triggered, that's success. If it goes from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, that's success. Like whatever that is for you. If it goes from 2 weeks to 2 days for you, celebrate the shit out of that, because that means you are getting back to a level of truth and consciousness that this thing outside of you is not actually you.
Absolutely. Love that. Love that. And I think the same way, it's like, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be in this flow state. I'm not going to be in this loving state 100% of the time. There are going to be things to show up to test me and see how fast I can self-correct. And giving ourselves that time, I think helps us build great content to share as coaches. Because if life was just so, peachy all the time, we would never know how to relate to other humans. So I say that we're perfectly imperfect humans with wounds to heal. And those, wounds could be old wounds that old programming that kind of sneaks in every now and then, or new things that show up to just test us and help us be more relatable. So I guess shifting your belief about what's happening to, oh, this is just building my strength, and building that muscle that I need some work on, Yeah. So that's great.
It's so true. And something that I think that's something that really affects coaches a lot. For anybody listening to this that's a coach, and for people who are not coaches, I want you to know about this. Coaches also struggle with all this same stuff, right? So don't think for a minute, like if you see a coach who says they never struggle with anything, run as far as you can and as fast as you can away from them. Because I don't think that any of this stuff, my conditioning or anything that's happened in the past, I am by no way, shape, or form trying to get to a place where that's gone forever. Because if that's my goal, then every time it shows up, I'm going to shame myself that I don't have it, quote, figured out yet. And the fact of the matter is, nobody has it figured out. Nobody truly has their shit together the way they may seem like they do. And that's fine. I get it from a social media perspective. People share their highlights. I'm sure I share a lot more highlights than lowlights in my own life, at least, publicly with my more intimate people. I share everything, but I share my struggles as well. And I think it's really important to note that, like, as long as you realize that the goal, or as long as you maybe aim for the goal to be knowing how to more masterfully navigate these things when they come up, as opposed to getting rid of them forever, that it makes it way easier to not beat yourself up when they come back up. Because I do that. I beat myself up like crazy. When I get like angry, like my anger when I was younger was just off the chain, ridiculous. Nowadays, I may have, I'm just being super truthful, I still may have 3 or 4 like angry outbursts during the year. Just, and it's, I don't hit things anymore. I don't throw things anymore, but I feel that same level of anger inside me. And I feel my like chest getting tight, and I feel my body getting hot, and I feel my shoulders going up, and I feel my mind spinning, and all these things are happening. And if I didn't have the mindset of progress over perfection, right? If I didn't have the mindset of what is this calling me to step into so I can more masterfully navigate this, as opposed to, you effing idiot, you should have this figured out by now and you should never ever get angry. Those two different perspectives will again change my experience of that thing. And if it's okay for me to have an angry outburst and to recognize that something happened and to recognize that I caused it with the level of thinking I was creating in that moment, to me, that's fine. And nobody needs to beat themselves up if they have their conditioning pop back up again, even after they've been doing the work for years.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think anger is a natural state that occurs metabolically, but it also can be the biggest motivator to change something. And sometimes we are not as quick to see what needs to be changed until we get angry. So it's, like you said before, recognizing, hey, this isn't the state that I want to be in. What's causing this state? And let me go and, you know, deal with that and process that. And what does that look like for you when you have these moments? Do you journal? Do you go to the beach? Do you go to your coach? Do you have a coach? Who's your mentor? Who's helping you when you get into those spaces where you feel, I need to get out of this and move forward through this, but not reject the feeling? Because feelings, we have to have feelings. We're human.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I never want to numb my feelings. I believe if you numb one, you numb all. Like, you can't truly experience joy and fulfillment if you're not willing to experience sadness and despair sometimes. For me, I definitely have a coach. I have multiple coaches actually, but as far as the coaches that I would go to for that, there's a couple different people that I can go to. Of course, having good friends that, you know, I think everybody needs to have at least one person in their life they can fall to pieces in front of so they don't fall apart. Like, I think that's really important. And I think even from this is not my area of expertise and I don't claim to be an expert, but, you know, I look at like the celebrities who commit suicide, and I feel like if they had somebody that they knew they could wholeheartedly trust to fall to pieces in front of, they wouldn't have fallen apart. Right. And I don't know that to be true, but that's my sense. And I keep that in mind. So having that's a really powerful thing. Journaling, I have a love-hate relationship with, because I hate journaling. I hate the fact of like sitting down and writing out my thoughts, and yet every time I do it, it's helpful. So that's definitely not my go-to. Yeah, same. Okay, yeah. So sometimes, like, if I hear like a really powerful question that really hits me, then that'll sometimes make me want to journal, because I'm like, oh, I want to see what happens with this question. But like just open form journaling, oh God, I can't stand it. So for me, a lot of times it is kind of just this, sometimes just out loud, talking through and processing what that looks like for me, right? Asking myself these questions about like, okay, is there any chance you're taking this too seriously, Jason? Like, even like in third person, like not me, it's you, right? Like the ego will fight if I say like, am I taking this too seriously? But if I can look in the mirror and say, are you taking it too seriously? The ego gets a little bit tricked. And just having a lot of compassion for myself. One of the things that I do, especially when if I get into a real low state, which happens, especially being an entrepreneur, it can be very isolating, and it can be very easy to not share your shit with other people because you want to appear like you have it all together. And so if I really need to have some self-love for myself, an exercise that I'll do is I will look in the mirror and I will apologize to myself for putting myself through what I'm putting myself through. Right. And it sounds a little weird, but this came from something my coach did with me. And it's something that I will always remember. And I share a lot because it's so powerful. Is my coach, a guy named Steve Chandler. He wrote a book called The Prosperous Coach, and he's written like 40 books. He's an amazing author, and definitely check out his books. But I remember one time I sent him this long email of all these things that were going wrong in my life. And like, I'm stressed about this, and I don't know what to do about this. And I'm about to spend a bunch of money investing in this, but what if it doesn't work out? And what if this, and I just like this whole long thing that I wrote to him. And he responded back with 10 words. And they immediately changed me then. And they continue to change me anytime I get in this state again. And the 10 words were, so much compassion for what you are putting yourself through. So much compassion for what you're putting yourself through. And we have the relationship of irreverence and kind of, poking fun, and we have the rapport, that I knew that that was part ridicule and part truth. And it was exactly what I needed to hear, because in that moment, he didn't say so much compassion for what you're going through. He said so much compassion for what you're putting yourself through. And I was like, oh, fuck. Everything that's on this page is completely self-created. It didn't change any of those circumstances. But as soon as I realized that I was putting myself through that, it raised my level of consciousness enough to say, oh, okay, wait a second. This is just calling me to be more creative and more curious with what's on my plate. This is a call for me to step into what I know to be true, that nothing is, or very few things in the world are permanent and pervasive. They're much more often temporary and isolated. And so if I can look at these things on my list through the lens of temporary and isolated, if I can look at these three things through the lens of my resourcefulness will always be bigger than my resources, that my creativity is always going to be greater than my circumstance, then all of the shit goes away and I can just deal with the thing that's right in front of me.
So easy.
Yeah, right. It's like you kick yourself sometimes. It's simple but not easy, right? It's simple but not easy.
Yeah, we just need to make it difficult so that we can have that sweet success feeling at the end when we realize, oh, I had the answer all along.
Right. Exactly. It's so true.
I think that's really great that he said that. Those 10 words, yeah, that one little difference, what you're putting yourself through, because we do have the power. We give our power away so much, and we have the power to change our reality every minute of every day. And so you do that by putting out that happiness and that playfulness. And I really appreciate that about you. It draws people to you that want what you're having. But yeah, I do know that, you can't stay like that all the time. And that comes from knowing sadness and knowing grief and knowing loss and knowing disappointment in yourself. And those are all feelings we all have to own and acknowledge. But it's how fast we can move from that state back to the flow state of joy and gratitude and just being. So do you have a morning routine or an afternoon routine or some kind of routine that you say, this is my go-to? You didn't like journaling, and I'm so right there with you. I talk about journaling in my book, but I wait until I'm like, in my head about something to actually say, okay, I need to write about this, and write it out and kind of dissect backwards how I got there. Or I'd much rather just talk to like my husband and say, okay, this is how I'm seeing this. How are you seeing this? Because he's not as sensitive as me about things. So he's going to come from a very black and white, and I'm going to add story and because of feelings and empathetic, nature of me. So I think we all need someone that we can trust with our stuff to talk us down. But we are ultimately our best coach. And when we can't get out of our head, we need some practices to get there. So do you have any daily things that keep you grounded?
Yeah, funny enough, I actually just started doing something. It was something, Kim, I fought against this for so long. I had everybody telling me that I, quote, should be doing this thing. And I didn't have, it wasn't that I couldn't see the benefit. It's that I didn't fully believe in the benefit. Like I could see oh, maybe that could be helpful. But so I had some level of willingness, but not a real level of trust that it was actually going to make a difference. And so I guess that means I didn't have true willingness, because I would have been willing to test it. And I'm finally at a place now where I was willing to test it, and it really does, it's working a lot. Is I had this terrible habit, oh God, it's so bad. This terrible habit of waking up in the morning, rolling over, light still off, one eye still partially closed from being asleep, grabbing my phone, and immediately starting to respond to Slack and WhatsApp and email and Instagram and Facebook and all the things that have happened from overnight. And I have one of my team members, Brian, is in South Africa, so I'm always inevitably going to wake up to things from him. I have another person I work with that's in India, and I know I'm going to wake up to stuff from them. And I had this belief that dude, you got to, as soon as you wake up, you better get on it, because if not, you're going to fall behind. And what that brought up for me was this belief that I had that was deeply ingrained that I didn't realize until I started unpacking this, was that I have this, not just a desire to be reliable, but an obsession with never dropping the ball, with never letting somebody down, right? And that can serve until it doesn't, right? It's like a piece of cheesecake is amazing. An entire cheesecake in one sitting, you'll puke all over the place, right? So it's like there is some level of really being obsessed with or being, desiring to be reliable and not drop the ball and not let people down, but that can become a detriment. And so I finally, just a couple weeks ago, I finally decided, first 2 hours of the day, I'm not touching my phone. My phone goes on airplane mode when I go to sleep at night. And so in the morning, even if I do grab it, just out of habit, there's no notifications on the screen. And if I even open my email, nothing happens because it's all on airplane mode. I can't respond to anything. And instead I'm reviewing like my life book. I'm reading, I'm watching videos. As you know, this morning I went to Venice Beach and just kind of meditated on the beach and did some reading there. And I'm doing all these things now that are just for me. Now, in the beginning, that was very, very hard because then I felt like, oh my God, you just lost 2 hours of your day and now you're gonna have to work even later in the night. And what I'm getting as I'm going through this process is I consider myself a pretty purposeful person. I really use purposefully the time that I have every day. And this called me to step into even more purposeful use of my time, to really be super clear about what is a high yielding activity in my life and what is a low yielding activity in my life. And what I've noticed is that I don't actually have to work any more hours, even though I'm taking the first 2 hours of the day to have it be just about me. And the way that it allows my mind to go into the day of work from a place of peace and not from a place of reactivity is changing my day tremendously.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad you're doing that. I get in those habits of doing that. And it's so rewarding because I tell my moms, that are busy with kids, look, even if it means waking up before they do, to give yourself that time. When my daughter, who's now 17, was just 12 weeks old, I decided to start going back to the gym and working out. And at first I brought her and went at 8:30 in the morning, and she was getting sick all the time. So I decided to wake up at 4:30. Even after getting up in the middle of the night and breastfeeding her, it was my time. And I'd be at that gym from 5 till 7. I'd walk in the door at 7. My husband would, leave for work and I would take over. But I was such a better mom. Mm. And I could take a nap when she took a nap, and then we'd go get her brother from school, and it just flowed. And it was what I had to do at that time. Now, I don't have to wake up that early, but my body's an early riser. So I tend to get up between 5 and 6 most days on my own. And it's my time to meditate, to go inward. Even if I fall back to sleep while I'm doing that, I feel like I've done something for myself. And I love my mindful movements, which I have on, free video. And that's a mix of Donna Eden's energy work and Qigong movements. And when I do that, even if it's just 5 minutes worth, totally sets the tone for my body to feel energy and to move in a flow state, just in alignment with my truth. And so that I'm not reacting and responding to the truth that I saw on the internet, the news posting, or what somebody wants from me. And I find that we are living in a day and age where I see it with teenagers just as much as I do with, entrepreneurs, is reactionary instead of going inward and sensing what's going to make the most use, what's my purpose, and how can I get to that without burnout. Because just like moms, if you're burnt out, you're going to be snippy snappy with that child. That child's not going to be thriving. You're going to feel like a bad mom. It's just the shame and blame and judgment cycle. So what can you do to give back to you? So I think that's great that you're doing that, and that you're going to probably bring that into all of your coaching and work. Grounding and going inward is where the answers are. And when we look out there, just adds more chaos to up here. So
it's true. Yeah, that quiet time in the morning, like I'm really seeing, and where I saw it for sure is there was actually a day last week where I didn't do it, where like I did it for like maybe 30 minutes and then I dove into stuff just because I had been at an event late the night before. So I woke up a little later, so I didn't have the full 2 hours. And so I only had a half an hour, and it made a big difference. Like that, it wasn't enough. Like I need to have that time in the morning to really allow myself to ease in, because even just taking 30 minutes was not enough, and my brain got into reactivity mode. So it is an amazing thing to give yourself that quiet time, or whatever that looks like for you, that you time in the morning, like you said. It's so powerful.
2 hours, I applaud you. I have not done it to that extent, and I need to. I think that's really amazing. So let me just give you some quick questions that I want to make sure I covered, just in case, because we have a group of supportive bus goers that I want to make sure I answer anything.
Oh, did they do questions?
I asked last night. Okay, what's currently the book on your shelf that you're reading, or what's the biggest motivation in your life right now?
Cool. So I go between a few books. So right now I'm reading well, I'm listening to a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by, I want to say it's Robert Glover. So that's a really good book, as well as the book Letting Go by Richard Hawkins, I think it is. I think it's Richard Hawkins. I'm almost definite. So yeah, so Letting Go and No More Mr. Nice Guy, which both have yellow covers, I think. I'm picturing them both. That's really funny. It's like sun. It's great. Anyways, so those are the two books that I'm reading. And there's a couple other ones that are in rotation, but those are the two main ones. And then my biggest motivation right now, oh man, that's a really good one. I think I think it's kind of twofold. Like, part of my biggest motivation is like you mentioned, the bus program that you're a part of, and I love having you in there. And it's really just to keep making that better and better. Like, I just want everybody there to have such an incredible experience. I want them to really feel empowered, really feel confident. And I don't want us to rest on like, well, cool, it's been good up to this point, we can just leave it as is. I want us to constantly be iterating and listening and seeing what's coming up and seeing how we can help. So that's a big motivation for me, not so much for the program, but just for people to get amazing results. But on the other side of that, I think my other big motivation is to figure out what the next thing is, like the bigger, broader thing, and not even something I need to monetize. Just like there's something in me, like I've said, I'm getting more and more comfortable saying this now. It was very uncomfortable when I first said it, and it felt very edgy for me, and I was worried about being judged, and I realized that going through the exact same stuff we talked about earlier, it's not helpful for me to worry about being judged and speaking my truth. It actually keeps me from my truth, doesn't bring me closer to my truth. And I have this inner knowing that I am meant to be on the level of somebody like a Jason Silva or a Jay Shetty, with the wisdom that I share, that's coupled with humor and levity, and the ability to be a little more irreverent and maybe a little more PG-13 than those guys are. And so I know that is something I'm meant to be doing. And so my motivation is to figure out, what does that look like for me in the world? I'm approaching it from not a perspective of thought leader, speaker, content creator, coach, like none of that stuff. I'm approaching it through the standpoint of like an artist, right? What is my art going to look like in the world in this next phase? So that's a big motivation for me. I don't have any structure for it. I'm kind of just like letting it unfold and just taking in whatever I take in and seeing what comes out as a result. But a big motivation there is to figure out the next level of my purpose and how to really live that out in the world.
I'll give you a question to ask yourself. Who
please.
In that audience to serve? If it's more PG-13, could it be that the young teens, would be an audience?
It's possible. I think their parents probably wouldn't like some of the things I would like to say, but no, I love that. I think that's a great, and I think the kids are, Tom Bilyeu from Impact Theory. He has a comic book that he's coming out with now. And I was at a small little gathering with him. It's him and Steve Aoki, the DJ, the Vegas DJ guy. They came together and created this. It's called like Neon Future or something like that. And so we were talking to him about it and saying like, why a comic book? Like, you have Impact Theory, you have millions of followers, not like, why a comic book? He said, it was tongue in cheek. He was partially kidding, but he said, the adults, they're screwed. Like, we're done. There's nothing we can do. We can't help them. But the kids, we still have a chance with the kids. So the comic book is like a personal growth / comic book kind of thing. And you know this. I mean, you brought your daughter to friggin' Mind Valley events. Like, I wish. And I'm
the only one?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, but it's like, it's amazing. Like, the kids have so much potential. So I love that as an idea. I think I had fun with the teens in Estonia. So maybe that is a good place.
Well, and when you were talking, that's what I thought. I thought you were one of their, favorite speakers, and they loved you, and you are charismatic, and you can rap.
That's true.
Like,
that's all I need. That's all I need is the rap.
So, for me, it's always, we want to self-serve, we want to self-love and do something that's in our passion, but how does that line up with our purpose? So I know there's a big opportunity out there to shift consciousness, because I see the sickness in that, those people, and you can relate to them with your stories of when you were younger, the overweight and blaming and shaming other people, and that anger. There's a great show that we're watching together on TV where they were showcasing a boy who was so angry and a bully at school, and they totally turned it around to show you why, so you can have compassion and empathy for him. Mm-hmm. And really, so many of these kids are so sensitive right now to the world around them, and they are disconnecting with their devices because it's easier than being in the world that's full of anger. So if we can do anything to lighten that up and play with that, I am all for it, and make it purposeful and meaningful and shift consciousness and shift mindsets. Yeah. Their parents are the problem typically. And, you know, can't do anything about that, you know.
Unless there's willingness, right? It goes back to the willingness. There has to be a willingness.
Yeah. And those are the people that we help when they come and they want help and shift it. So I think you have a great message and a great voice. And if being on stage as a Jay Shetty or on the internet, you know, is the way to get to the masses with that voice, you are called to do it. So make it happen.
I will. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, I love you to death. That's not good. I love you to life.
I love you. I love you to life too. I love that. It's a great shift. It's beautiful.
And you wore my favorite shirt, Made of Love.
Yes.
Yes, because I am all about be the love you seek. Yes. And that doesn't mean suppressing feelings and emotions or shaming yourself or blaming yourself. It means tuning in to why you might feel that way so you can love yourself to love another and accept and love each other, which is really all the healing we need. Just spread that message of how to get there. So thank you, Jason, for being you, for showing up in your authentic self every time I see you. One thing Skip Kelly told me is, you know, Kim, I've never seen you any other way. You are always authentic you. And I would say that about you, Jason. I never see you any other way. That doesn't mean that you don't have heartache and pain, but you never let it stop you from being the love. So
thank you so much, Kim. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And, you know, it's one of those things where you spot it, you got it. I mean, you have a huge heart, and that's why you see it in me. It's such an easy reflection to say to you, everything you just said to me, I see in you. So thank you for showing up the way you show up each and every day.
Oh, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. I'll see you on the bus.
Yes, I'll see you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, bye. Bye.